What's up, peeps? This is going to be my latest political podcast. I'm recording this on January 21st, 2017. So today you have a lot of women's marches occurring across the country. Um, Not surprising given that it's the day after Trump's inauguration. But today I want to talk about conversations with other people and sort of communication in our society among all different sorts of people, but especially strangers of all things. Um, And I know I have a few weeks to talk about political bubbles, but I sort of just want to go more in depth because this is something that's been on my mind for the last few days, and I think about this all the time. And I apologize if you hear some sort of construction work happening in the background because they're doing some repairs at the apartment, but I think you should still be able to hear my voice. So, again, apologies for that. But going back to this topic of strangers, I think in the last few years, technology has done a lot of good, right? It's allowed us to facilitate communication, talk to other people, but it's also led to a sort of self-segregation where sometimes in our own bubbles, we are more sort of introverted in that we talk to our own social circles, but not a whole lot out of that. Um, I feel like there's less communicating with people of completely different backgrounds and stuff like that, and I think it's a problem, but I think it's also something that we can change. And I want to give an anecdotal example because I think it's important, even though it's only applies to me. I think it speaks to a larger problem. So when I was growing up, I grew up in a town called Santa Clarita. There are like a few houses next to ours, but there's one house directly next to our house. And I would say in my lifetime, and I'm only 22 years old, there's probably been about 4 to 5 different families since I lived in Santa Clarita, which was basically my whole life. So in that, in like these 22 years, there's been 5 different families in that house. When I was growing up, I would say the first 2 or 3 families I knew well, and each one we knew better than the last. We were generally close. It wasn't like we were like best friends, but I would occasionally go over. They had kids my age. I would play with them, and even though it wasn't like, again, we weren't like super good friends, but we would know each other and hang out from time to time, and I knew my neighbors. And then as we go on and more, as there were more and more neighbors, or as there are different families growing up, different families moving to that house growing up, we seem to be less and less distant. I don't have any connection with the current neighbors. Granted, I currently live in Palo Alto, but I do go back to my home pretty often, and there's just no connection. And I know it's anecdotal, but I think it speaks to the changing volume in the last 20 years on sort of what we see as less communication with strangers and sort of less communication in general, and I think that's a problem. And this isn't a new idea. I mean, people have been talking about this for a while. In university, in about 50% of my classes, we would reference this book called Bowling Alone, which was written by, I believe, Robert Putnam, and I think it was written in 2000, maybe late 90s, early 2000s. And basically what the book said, the title Bowling Alone referred to the fact that in the past a lot of people signed up for bowling leagues and things like that, but nowadays there's been a decrease in the membership and a lot more people just bowl on their own. And it talks about in general how people in more recent times have been less active in community groups and things like that. And I do think there's a lot of truth to it. I feel like communities get so isolated. I feel like it's hard to learn my neighbors. I'm glad I had a conversation with my neighbor here in Palo Alto, just a brief one. I don't even know his name, but at least we had some sort of conversation, and it was nice. But it really just sucks how much society has changed to the point where we don't interact with people, especially people of different viewpoints. And I talked about this in political bubbles, but I talk about the general idea with my friends all the time. Like, I feel like society needs more genuine conversations. Like, when's the last time I don't even remember among my friends. Actually, I do remember, but it was a long time ago. It was like 6 months ago. Among my friends, I asked them, "What do you want to do before you die?" A very deep question. And I think we need those sort of deep conversations in our society instead of just surface level talks. Surface level talks are good, but there's no point in having surface level talks if you never get to the deep questions as well. And And the thing is, we can all help each other. The thing is, if someone told me what they wanted to do before they die, maybe I couldn't help with everything, but maybe I could at least try to help. Like, I'll tell you some of the few things I want to do before I die is I've never gone snowboarding, I've never gone surfing. I would like to do both. There's a lot of other things I'd like to do before I die, but those are things that realistically could easily be checked, be done in a day. It wouldn't be something that I'd have to work long towards. It's not like I want to be a professional snowboarder. I just want to go snowboarding once. I just want to go surfing once at least. And I have friends that do both and who could theoretically help me. I just don't talk to those friends necessarily as much, and I should reach out too. Everything I'm saying, it's not as though I'm on the high ground. I'm also stuck in this situation. It's also something I'm trying to work on myself, but I think it's something that, needs to be addressed. And I think even though I have friends that could help me with snowboarding, I think I could help my friends with other things, whether that be public speaking, which I have a lot of experience with through debate, writing, which I've had some editorial experience, if it what it's like to learn an instrument from not knowing anything, things like this. Like, these are all things that I think we could help each other with, like help each other achieve our life goals, even complete strangers. And I sort of wish we took more time to get to know people better, and it wasn't crazy. Like, I wish I could go up to someone on the street and maybe not start off with, what do you want to do before you die, but meet a stranger on the street and eventually get to that point as well. And again, this is not something I do or I have done, but it is something that I would like to do. And I think in society, even among our friends, if we just had more conversations about the things that mattered most, we could really fix things. And I think there needs to be a way for us to discuss the important issues such as politics without us going into without us being very defensive. We need to be very humble when we have these discussions, because I think it allows us to grow. And if you listen to the podcast, a few podcasts ago, I talked about political bubbles, and I talked about being open to different viewpoints and how that helps you learn. And I've been definitely doing that in my own personal life by reading a lot of political stories recently from the other perspective and sort of hearing other points of view. But again, I don't really get to have the political conversations that I had in college or in debate. So it's a lot harder to facilitate those sort of things, especially when you live in the Bay Area of California, where there's a predominantly liberal mindset. I would like to have more discussions with conservatives on issues and things like that, but it's not exactly the easiest bridge to gap in certain communities just because of the way the political and other demographics are set. That being said, I still want to try having these meaningful conversations. But again, this is all super important. I mentioned how growing up, I was a lot closer to my original neighbors than the neighbors further on. And I think society has many benefits, but we're getting to the point where I think social media is actually sort of holding us back from meaningful engagement. Sites like Meetup are great because the whole idea of a meetup is that you meet up in person and that the site simply exists to facilitate active engagement. But with Facebook and Twitter, you could be staring at the screen for 20 minutes, and I've been there too. Again, I'm not taking the high ground on any of this. I've been through these same dilemmas, but we don't actually talk to people as much. And here's another idea is, what happened to phone calls? Nowadays it's just text with most people, but seems the phone call world has gone away. But phone calls are so much more intimate and so much I think more powerful, and I feel like we're maybe afraid of them, or like we feel vulnerable, but I think that's okay. I think phone calls are so much better. I understand that sometimes we're busy, so maybe text to see if someone's free and then call, but we should still have that call. And again, this is something I want to work on as well. But I think all of these things are super important because I think as humans we want good communities, and we create good communities by censoring a sense of community, by fostering. You have to in order to foster a community, you have to build a certain amount of trust and respect, which I think comes from generally knowing people, and you generally know people by having genuine conversations. That's all. That's conversations is part of communication. It's what it's all about. Having these sort of real talks is what's so important in our lives. And I think we need to get more bold sometimes. And even if we ask someone on the street and they reject us or something like that, that's okay. Because I recently watched this really good TED Talk, and I'm going to post it. Um, I post my podcast through YouTube, and I'll include a link in the description. But it was basically this guy who read about rejection therapy, and he did 100 days of rejection so that he could get used to the feeling. Because he wanted to start his own business, but he was afraid of rejection, but he wanted to get used to it. So he did random things every day. It was something as simple as asking for a free burger, which he was rejected, asking for custom donuts at Krispy Kreme, I believe it was, which he actually did get the custom donuts, trading in $1 and ended up getting like a ice bucket, like all these different things. And it was really inspiring, and I really want to try this out. Like the idea is that you get used to the rejection, but none like you don't get to talk to strangers unless you make the effort, and sometimes they may rebuff your advances. Obviously respect someone's personal space, of course, but you're never going to get those opportunities unless you go and make those. I mean, that's what the TED Talk sort of taught me, and it's something I'm very interested in because both in terms of asking out women or just in life in general and trying new things. I want to get over rejection because lately in my life, I've been feeling like I'm in a situation where I'm trying hard at a lot of things and failing and failing and failing, and I want to give up, but I know that, only through going through the process I'm going to get better. Like learning Spanish, like playing guitar, like trying a band, like learning programming, all these different things. It's a process. Um, but creating communities is just so important, and I'm very thankful for the close friends I have, and I'm able to talk to them, hopefully like once a week at least. And the thing is, even if my friend lives in DC, I'm still able to Skype with him or her or whoever it may be, and these are the good conversations that makes life meaningful. It's all about these friendships. And the reason I worry about this so much is I feel like things have become superficial in many ways, whether it's hookup culture or surface level conversations. Let me be very clear. I'm purposely okay with people making those choices and people wanting to do that. That's perfectly respectable. I'm not making any moral claims here. I'm just saying that when that becomes so prevalent that there's no long-term relationships, and I mean long-term relationships in any sense of the word, not just romantic, but platonic or just in general. I think that does hurt society because any given moment someone could leave, and that's the end of that. And you don't build senses of community when at any moment someone could just leave willy nilly. Um, Instead, you want to build a society where you know that everyone has your back and everyone's there for you. And honestly, this is gonna sound weird, but I think that's actually why some people voted for Trump, almost in an optimistic way. Of course, it's misguided because Trump is a master manipulator. But the idea is, if you think about growing up in these blue collar towns, and generally they tend to be smaller than bigger cities like Los Angeles and New York, unsurprisingly, you tend to know the community, and so you have these good talks, and you have these jobs which were great, manufacturing. Even if you just had a high school degree, you could provide for your family, and your family knew other families that worked at the factory, etc. And then it all went away, and you're left, and everything you knew is gone, and the world is changing, and it sucks. And Trump promises to bring it all back as though the past was perfect, even though there were, of course, problems with the past, especially with exclusion of certain members from the community, like African Americans, like Latinos, Latinas, like Native Americans, etc. I mean, discrimination was definitely there 30, 40, 50 years ago, as well as it still persists today. But Trump promises to bring that back, and of course you go to it, because behind all that pessimism, make America great again. The key word there is again, as though bringing back the sense of greatness was there, and the big question is, well, what do you mean? When was it great? When does again mean? But I think that's actually part of the reason people went to Trump. It was a false sense. It was a sort of false sense of a hope, which was bad. I keep on drawing these analogies between Donald Trump and Bane. And there's actually another great video. I'll post a link. where it does a side-by-side comparison of Trump's inaugural address to Bane, and oh my God, it's a splitting image. Like, take control, like, give power to the people. But it's all a facade, just like Bane's whole thing was a facade. It was all false hope. His whole idea was giving people hope and taking it away from them in the movie. Same thing with Donald Trump's presidency. Um, Sorry I've been going on these random tangents, but again, we're having good conversation here. I'm just freestyling on my phone, and hopefully someone cares enough to listen to it, even if it's just like one other person. Shout out to that one person. It seems like the videos I've been posting so far, I've been getting about 20 views, which is definitely better than one view, although I'm sure at least half of those are myself. Um, that being said, um, let's talk about active steps we could do to engage this problem, because I've been rambling about, there's been problems with not having conversations. You want your community to be there. It just creates a sense of fulfillment for you. But let's talk about active steps. And these are steps I want to try too, but active steps into how do we bring about this change? How do we facilitate these more meaningful conversations? How do we talk to strangers? I think first, try to talk to strangers that are in your vicinity. So that's not necessarily going up to someone on the street, that might be great. But maybe at work there is a colleague that you do not know that well, but they do work in your same office. That's a place to start. Starting with the small talk first, just getting to know them, and then maybe asking about the deeper things. So that's one of the things. I think the second thing is within our own strong friends, asking the tough questions. Asking questions like, what do you want to do before I die? And helping that person. Like, some things are going to be tough. Things like learning a second language don't happen overnight. They do take years, really, to get really good. But you could help your friend if you speak that language. You could give advice. You could help out in the way you can. And believe me, not everything on someone's bucket list necessarily needs to be something that takes years. What if someone like me just wants to learn skating or solve a Rubik's Cube or something like that? These things might not necessarily take just an hour, but they could easily get done in a week or so. And imagine the accomplishment. Imagine both if you got, imagine from two perspectives. Both you have this goal and someone helps you do it and you're able to accomplish that, and then imagine also being the helper and helping someone accomplish their goals. Oh my God, it's a feeling like no other. And I think if we had more of those conversations, it would be amazing. Three is, I think we got to go bold sometimes. I think stuck in jobs we don't like, or stuck in situations we don't like, sometimes we just got to go for the frontier. We got to take, sometimes there's an old saying in my debate team, is a big inside joke. It was like, sometimes you got to take risks, and honestly, that's true. I want to be more bold in my life. I feel like I'm not being bold enough, but I would like to take up the mantle and be more bold and do more things. And sometimes, like, I just imagine saying, I'm not going to do this anymore at my work, putting in a leave of absence or something and traveling the world, or just doing something else, or something. I mean, I would love to be a world reporter, travel around the world and talk about interesting conversations, travel to Tibet or even dangerous areas like Syria, like be a war reporter. Like, that would be amazing. That would be something I'd least like to experience if possible. But of course, those jobs are few and far in between, and given that I only speak English, have a general understanding of Spanish that I'm working on, and basically none, a little bit of Hindi, but pretty much none. It's a hard world out there. But yeah, asking people what they want to do on their bucket list is a good one. The third is actively engaging with people with opposing viewpoints. So even if that's as simple as reading articles from another, like political articles from another perspective, or having civilized political talks with people on the other side. I mean, those are how ideas move forward. Those are how we have real engagements. Four, I think reading a lot is helpful. Just reading new perspectives and just reading in general. But that's more of a side thing. Maybe it's because I have a book right next to me. Five, trying to think. This is all off the cuff, so I don't really have anything set prepared me. I'm just thinking of general ideas that would be good. Spending more time in person or with our friends instead of just on Facebook or online, if possible. Obviously, if your friend lives across the country or something else or in a different country, it might not be the easiest thing to do. But if your friend lives in your vicinity, spending more time with them. Um, let's see what other things we can do. I mean, I think that those are the main things. I mean, it's not necessarily having to do crazy things, but actively going in meetups, overcoming our fear of meeting strangers, and going to those meetups and all those different things. Like I get anxious a lot. I mean, a lot of meetups, I was very anxious and very scared, and I did it, and I made a lot of great opportunities that way. Whether it's from joining the Quidditch team here, shout out to the Silicon Valley Vipers, whether it's starting in the last few weeks going to a Spanish language meetup, whether it's starting doing trivia with my friends, which has been a great experience, like all those different things. And sorry if I've been rambling. I just, the whole point is having genuine conversations. So I really wanted this to be just real talk, straight from the heart, uncuffed. And I know the last few podcasts have been sort of general things and general thoughts. I'll try to focus on more specific topics. Coming, the February podcast, and now that Mr. Trump is president, it should be easier to focus on his agenda, talking about how to fight the bad things, how to deal with that, etc. But anyways, thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate your support. This podcast I largely do because I like doing it, and it only helps me if it only makes I do it for myself. The what's it called? The cherry on top is if other people listen to it. That's fantastic. If you do enjoy the podcast, please share it. Please let me know if there's something you want me to discuss. Again, I really want this podcast, if there are other people really listening, to be a very active and community engaged podcast. So if you want to come on the podcast, you live in the Bay Area, let's talk about anything. I love sports. I love basketball. I'm a huge Toronto Raptors fan. I love baseball and I love football. So let's talk about those. You want to talk about music? I love music too. I'm into rock stuff. I play guitar and bass. I have many interests, and I'm willing to talk about generally everything. So even if you don't like politics and you just want to talk and post about it online, let's do that. We can start a basketball podcast, or we can start a music podcast, or just post it on here. So I do appreciate that. And just again, thanks for listening. Thanks for supporting this. I recently changed the name of my channel from Pineapple Patel to Project Patel. I think that sounded cooler anyway. So that being said, thanks again, and have a great day. That's all. I guess that's all there is, and hopefully you agreed with me, and we'll get more genuine conversations happening in the world. All right, thanks, peeps. Peace out.